This is Frank Morano. You're watching Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. So much of the drama going into last night's Democratic debate didn't have to do with who was going to qualify for the debate. It had to do with which candidates might boycott it. More specifically, which candidate. Tulsi Gabbard put out a video the previous week saying that the DNC was rigging the process along with CNN and the New York Times, and she was seriously considering boycotting the debate. Well, thankfully for viewers and people that want a different and maybe something of a balanced perspective, she did not boycott the debate. Instead, she came out both guns a-blazing. This was Tulsi last night talking about impeachment in Ohio.
Impeachment is driven by these hyper-partisan interests. It will only further divide an already terribly divided country. Unfortunately, this is what we've already seen play out as calls for impeachment really began shortly after Trump won his election. And as unhappy as that may make us as Democrats, he won that election in 2016.
You know, I think it says a lot about the Democratic establishment and the state of the media that basically a candidate is out there saying, yeah, let the person elected finish the term that they were elected to. And that is all of a sudden controversial. I'll tell you, one of the best recaps that I've read today on the debate, because I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, appeared in the Spectator USA. It's called Tulsi Gabbard Was a Dove on the Warpath. And not surprisingly, I should have known better, it was written by one of my favorite journalists, an independent journalist, a guy that is pretty unpredictable when giving his perspective, and the only person on Twitter worth following, the one and only Michael Tracey. Michael, thanks for coming on with us.
Good to be with you again.
So give me your take in a nutshell on this. Tulsi was not on the debate stage last time around. Neither was Tom Steyer. Give me your take on the new additions in last night's debate, Tulsi Gabbard and Tom Steyer.
Well, as you mentioned, Tulsi threatened to boycott the debate, and I never thought that was particularly plausible because, for better or worse, mostly worse, the campaigns devote enormous energy and resources to qualifying for these debates, because that's just how the process is structured. It's sort of corrupt that everything revolves around these corporatized spectacles, but that's just the reality. So I always figured that she would end up going. But the reasons why she may have boycotted were perfectly legitimate, and that was put on full display by how she responded to one of the questions last night, and I think in her best moment. She said that the CNN and the New York Times, who happened to be the co-moderators of the debate, had behaved despicably, and they had just in the past couple days toward her. I mean, I'm somebody who follows the media coverage of Tulsi fairly closely, and the New York Times profile on her that was released on Saturday
abysmal.
was abysmal. It was probably the most just brazen smear job that she's gotten so far in the
I couldn't tell
press,
after reading that if she was Donald Trump's partner, a white supremacist, an agent of Assad, or a Russian agent. I couldn't tell which one.
It's so bizarre because although she does have heterodox support, she draws from some libertarians and conservatives, no doubt. But if you go to any one of her campaign events, if you talk to her volunteers, her staff, they're all pretty much Democrats. So it's not like she's so outside the mainstream that she doesn't have just fairly predictable Democratic Party support, at least among the rank and file, some leftist supporter, anti-war people. But that always gets construed by these profiles as nefarious or something. Like that she has a broad range of support, including but not limited to Democrats, is always cast in the most sinister possible light. And the New York Times did it in the most lazy and knee-jerk fashion in that most recent article. And then on the day of the debate, CNN hosted a panel in which a gentleman by the name of Bakari Sellers participated. He just asserted matter-of-factly, with nobody challenging him, really, that Tulsi Gabbard is a puppet of the Russian government. Now, that's a fairly serious charge to level, and you'd think that it might have occurred to one of the people on the CNN stage there to say, hey, you know what, maybe that should be substantiated by some evidence rather than just blithely claimed with nothing even remotely resembling substantiation. But Bakari Sellers just got away with it. So that was the context in which Tulsi, I think, said to herself, you know, the rationale I might have given for boycotting the debate was legitimate, But rather than actually boycotting and not being there, let me use this opportunity to illustrate why the grounds for my potential boycott would have been perfectly valid. And she did that by really lashing harshly and justifiably into both CNN and the New York Times for their recent conduct. But it wasn't just about her. She sort of broadened it adroitly into a condemnation of the political and media class on a bipartisan level, including Trump, but not limited to Trump, which Democrats hate. You have to focus exclusively on Trump for them to really be satisfied or to have their sort of emotional urges met. But she went after Trump, but she also indicted the bipartisan political and media class for being complicit in the ongoing debacle in Syria, which has now reached this new phase and has been one of her primary animating issues since she's been in Congress and since she's been running for president. So that really got people upset, and she touched a nerve.
Michael, let's talk about Syria. It was very interesting, and you quoted Joe Biden on your Twitter feed as saying President Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syria was the most shameful foreign policy act of any president in modern history. And I'm thinking, clearly someone has completely forgot about the Iraq War. You've chronicled very clearly that Joe Biden is evidencing some serious signs of cognitive decline. Do you think that's what that was, or do you think this is just hyperbole from a politician?
It's always hard to tell with Biden whether his verbal miscues, as the media likes to euphemistically call it, are the product of his obvious cognitive impairment, or if he's just being outright duplicitous. It's probably some very sordid combination of the two. But that claim, I thought, was just extraordinary. I mean, imagine it. Joe Biden is gazing out on the history of U.S. foreign policy in the modern era, whatever that means. Let's just say it starts with, I don't know, post-World War II. And he's saying that if you look at all that the U.S. has done abroad since, I don't know, let's just say 1945, the most despicable and shameful act that any U.S. president has ever committed is removing troops from a war zone. Now, I don't think necessarily that Trump's withdrawal was conducted in the best possible manner, and there's some criticism there in terms of how he actually implemented it. But this idea that you're going to call it the most shameful episode of U.S. history in terms of foreign policy is just nuts. Not only has Joe Biden forgotten about the Iraq War, which, by the way, he helped to sell and voted for and continues to distort his record on. I actually questioned him on the Iraq War a couple weeks ago in New Hampshire, and he claimed falsely to me that he opposed it before it began, which was just absolutely factually wrong. But I don't go back to Libya, you can go to Syria, you can go to Vietnam, you can go to Panama. I mean, anybody who can crack open a history book should have about 25 different episodes that were exponentially more shameful than the removal of these troops, notwithstanding how Trump may have carried it out in a boneheaded manner.
No kidding.
So that was preposterous. But that's not the type of thing that the media likes to dwell on. They look for more of like, was Joe Biden properly sort of telegenic? Did he seem like he had his marbles? Well, no, he never has had his marbles. But if you look at the substance of what he claimed there, it was just shockingly appalling.
In the final 10 seconds that we have together, Michael, let me ask you about Mayor Pete Buttigieg. There seems to be a desire to prop him up as the more moderate alternative to Joe Biden if Biden falters. How do you think that's going to play out?
I think that there are a lot of people who are probably a little nervous now about Joe Biden seeming to lose steam, although it should be said that Biden's polling lead has remained moderate alternative. But if he's going to acquire that mantle by engaging sort of petulantly on the debate stage with every other candidate, I'm not sure how well that's going to sell. I think maybe they're going to have to wait a little longer for Mayor Pete to demonstrate something beyond the ability to be a little, to be well polished,
Michael,
and to chastise others for their policy chops.
That's for sure. We're going to have to end it there. It's always a real treat to talk with you. As I've said, Michael Tracey is the only person worth following on Twitter. I'm still waiting for him to follow me back, but some things are worth waiting for. Michael, we'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good. When I follow you back, it'll be such a great surprise that maybe it'll.
That's when I'll know I've made it.
The wait will be worth it.
Exactly.
Honestly, I just doesn't even cross my mind to follow people necessarily.
Well, that's good to know. That's good.
But I'm gonna. It's in my memory bank.
Thank you. At
happen.
Frank Moreno. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about Medicare and how the open enrollment choices you are facing, or maybe a parent or a loved one is facing, could affect not only their health but their pocketbook. This is Frank Moreno on Liquid Lunch. You're watching Newsmax TV. We'll be right back.